Welcome to the PEP8 Python Professional Guidelines course. You probably know how to print a string or an integer. Maybe you even know how to work with classes, objects, or even create complex games and apps. But do you really know how to create a professional code, meeting the standards of any company? Chances are that you don't. Today there are a lot of degrees and boot camps that are focusing on how to write software that works, but just a few focus on how to write that software in a professional, consistent and well-documented manner. Here's where PEP8 comes into play. PEP8 is the most popular code style guide for Python. It is widely known and used by the Python community. In fact, code is more often read than written. So when you write a code, it's important to keep it readable for your team and yourself as well. Every time you write a code, you communicate with the computer system, your team, and yourself sometime later. If your code is not well written, it might cause some issues and confusions between those three parties. And what usually happens is that programmers say, my code works, I will be the only one working on this project, I don't need to worry about readability. And then they come to it after a month and they say, what the hell is this? Did I write it? They spend their precious time going through their own code again. This is not efficient at all. But how do you know if your code is readable? Usually for every programming language there are special documents defining an ideal code style. Those are called guides. Style guides describe how we should name variables, modules, and structure a project written with a certain programming language. For Python, this guide is called PEP8. There is a lot of information in those documents. But don't worry, in this course I'm using easy to understand approach with a lot of examples. What is PEP8? Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about why PEP8 is needed and what it actually is. But before that, let's imagine that you're a programmer and as a programmer you're writing some code. You might not know, but while you're working as a software engineer, a code is way more read than written. So let's say in 80% of your time you're going to read through other people's code, while only at 80% of your time you will write the actual code. So once you write a code, there are actually three main places where your code is read. The first place is it is read from your computer or from the system that is basically executing your code. It is of course read by you later on, maybe after one day or maybe after 1 year, it doesn't matter. And then it is also read by the people you work with, the people from your organization, or maybe even from the clients you work for. If you have a project that is shared, let's say on GitHub or Bitbucket, there would most probably be many people that are going to read your code. So the combination of those three is basically the whole system of eyes that are looking into your code. As you can imagine, when your code is read by the computer doesn't care how much how long or how it looks your code, because it just executes it. It transfers it to a binary representation of it and it executes it. However, as humans, we don't read very good binary language, but also even the Python code could be way more well understood if it's written in an appropriate way. But what happens if you don't pay attention at the guidelines and the rules when writing your code, and let's say you're not following any standard with your colleagues? Well, if you write your code today and you have a look at your code in, let's say, 1 week, you would definitely struggle to understand it, especially if your code is not on the right indentation levels, you don't add any comments. You would definitely need a little more time to understand and catch up with what you did 1 week ago. And the things even get worse after a month or 1 year, as your brain have been focusing on different things throughout this month or year. When you get back to a code that was already written even by you, you have no clue what's going on there. For you, this is going to be just a bunch of words that don't make any sense. So what do we do in that case? Well, in order to cope with that in Python and basically in any programming language, we're having something called guidelines. Or those guidelines are basically showing you how to write your code. They will show you how to write your functions, the correct way to write comments, do imports, defining objects, classes, and so on. So all of us that are using this programming language can write a code in the same way that can be understood by anyone in the industry. And Python has a very specific documentation that is defining those guidelines called PEP8. PEP8 is a style used by absolutely every company that is professionally building code in Python. Those guidelines are very important for every team, and if a team doesn't follow those, there could be such a big confusion, especially if you work on huge projects. So knowing PEP8 guidelines for Python will either make it easier for you to integrate into a software engineering team, or it will allow you to improve a team that doesn't follow those guidelines and make the projects that the team is working on way more efficient and readable from everyone. So PEP8 is the topic of this course, and this is a very important topic if you want to be a professional Python developer. So in the next videos, we're basically going to cover absolutely every single guideline with real-world example, so you can see how PEP8 works on real projects, and you will build a confidence in writing code in Python in the right way, the way that is used in all of the major companies that are professionally writing automation, tests, or machine learning scripts with Python. So in the rest of the sections, you will see absolutely every single rule from those guidelines, and you will be able to learn it. So we're going to talk about code layout. We're going to talk about indentations, where to do tabs and spaces, how to define the maximum line length, what are the rules for the binary operators, blank lines, imports, and so on. PEP8 also looks at the comment style, and this is something very important. You would look on how to write your block comments, inline comments, and how to set the documentation for the different functions and methods in your Python code. One of the most detailed sections from the PEP8 guidelines is the naming conventions. And here you're going to learn what names you should put for your classes, variables, how to create exceptions in Python in the right way so they're readable, how to define your methods, names, and instances. We'll even cover the overriding principle that Python is using so it can decide which variable to use if there are two with the same names. And finally, PEP8 covers the programming rules, or what are the function annotations, the variable annotations, and I will really show you examples of the correct and the wrong way to write things in Python. There are some tools that are automating the PEP8 guidelines into your code, and those are called linters and formatters. While the linters are responsible for telling you what is wrong with your code, the formatters are attempting to fix and align your code with the PEP8 guidelines. And in fact, today, most of the common IDEs are having built-in those linters and formatters, and they're helping you with the PEP8 guidelines so you can keep your code up to date. However, in order to use those functions of the IDEs, you really need to be informed and know the PEP8 guidelines quite good so you can use these capabilities and actually improve your code readability. So the guidelines that I'm going to provide you for the next videos until the end of the course are intended to improve the readability of your code and make it consistent across a wide spectrum of Python code and projects. And to be honest, this course is all about consistency. Consistency with the PEP8 requirements is very important for a successful Python project. So we will make sure that every single project and every single module or function within this project that you're writing in Python in the future are going to be consistent and follow the same rules. So I hope you liked this video for the introduction of PEP8, and bear with me in the next one where we're going to talk about the code layout and what are the major rules for setting up the indentation of your code so it is having a good readability. Thanks for watching. If you ever wanted to create from scratch a complete Python web application using Flask in Django, check out our completely free mini course from the link in the description. Now let's get back to the course. Code layout. Hi guys, and welcome back to the course. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can keep your indentation level and what are the major rules to align your code, and also we're going to create our first project where we're going to write the examples. So let's open PyCharm, and here let's create a new project and just choose a location where you would like to place your project. For example, I'll create a new folder here and I will call it PEP8 projects, and I will call this first project code layout. Code layout. So right here, let's create a new file. Okay, and let's select a Python file. So in our project, let's select a new file, and here I will select Python file. So let's name this file indentation. Okay, so here I'm going to show you a very simple way for how you can break a line in Python without any penalty while your code is readable. So in Python, you could face a few situations. So let's say you want to write a function. So let's create a def long function, and here I'm gonna pass a bunch of input variables. So it is very important that here you pass enough variables so your line is too long, and you'll see how we're gonna break it. Let's say that you have a variable 1, then variable 2, then variable 3, and variable 4. Okay, so this is actually quite long, so we cannot leave it like this. And let's just add some body into the function. Let's do print hi PEP8. Okay, and as you can see from here, this is something that is not recognized from PyCharm. So usually PyCharm has these PEP8 recognitions that are sorting your code according to the PEP8 guidelines. Okay, so however, even though a PEP guideline says that the line cannot be that long, we will need to break this line to multiple lines. So there are some rules that you need to follow here in order to do that in the right way. So as a general rule, you cannot break a line into the same indentation level as the body of your function. And there is a good reason for that. So if I break the line like this, you can see that I can definitely confuse the inputs with the body of the function. So this is really not great. And for that reason, the rule for breaking the input line of function is to place it 2 indentation levels in. So basically one indentation level, as you can probably see, it's exactly 4 spaces. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So this means that you will need to place your broken line 8 spaces from the beginning. Also another rule, actually let me write the rules here. So first, 8 breaking inputs line in 8 spaces or 2 tabs from the beginning of the line. And also the second rule for breaking a line here, according to the PEP8 guidelines. So the second rule would be breaking inputs line only from a bracket, okay? Or actually these are parentheses, but you got the idea. So you can only break the line from the parentheses here. For example, something like this, if you want to break it from here, this would not be quite acceptable for a function, okay? So always break from the parentheses. And then you can even see that here we are getting on the right indentation level. Now, what about if you want to break your line even more? So if this is not acceptable for you and your line is still too long, well, then the next rule is that every next break, so let's do every next break is from a comma. So obviously you cannot break your variables right in the middle because this wouldn't make any sense, but you need to break them from the comma. And after that, every next line should also be within 2 tabs or 8 spaces from the beginning of the line. And you can see that this actually really makes sense because here you can see that you can definitely distinguish the body of the function and the input line here. So these are the rules for the function. However, when you print variables and when you run function within a variable, the rules are slightly different. So let's see how that's done. Let's create a variable. Actually, let's first assign something to those variables here so we can pass them to the function later on, and I will show how this is done. So let's write here, actually let me copy those. So let's make those equal to 1, 2, 3 and 4, so they have values. And after that, what I'm gonna do is I'll create a variable called, let's call it person would be equal. So let's run this function. Let's run long function. Okay. And here I will pass those variables 1, 2, 3 and 4 that now have values. Okay. So you can clearly see that this line here is also too long and it needs to be broken again. So especially if you're working on a big project, you really face those type of issues quite a lot, so you should be able to know how to cope with them. Now, in the case where you run function within a file, you can break it right from the comma right here, and once you do that, then the rule is that you should align the next line with the with the bracket, okay, or with the parentheses. So if you break not from the parentheses but from the comma, and this is a rule that you should apply always when you assign variables to a function that is passed to a single variable here. So basically when you run a function, the line should be broken in that way, or here the next line is aligned with the parentheses, with the opening parentheses of the previous line. And you can see the difference here. While here we're aligning with 8 spaces from the beginning of the line, here we basically doesn't care about the spaces, but we're aligning with the same position of the parentheses. So this is the main difference. For example, if I would do something like this here in the function, let's say that I move those lines 1 indentation level in or 4 spaces, you can see that you can definitely not distinguish the body of the function from the inputs. And also if I move this line right here, the code somehow it looks way less readable since you don't know where this line is coming from. While if you align it with the parentheses, you can definitely see that the parentheses begin here and end here in the next line. Next, we're going to talk about how you can write the correct indentation when you're working with if statements. So let's first create two variables. Let's write clean equal to true and available also equal to true. So let's create now if statement that will incorporate those two conditions. So let's do if, and let's say we want to sell a house. So we want the house to be clean and also available in order to sell it. So let's do if clean and available. Let's print ready for viewing. So first of all, do you see any issues here? Well, normally in Python and in PEP8 guidelines, when you're writing an if statement after stating the variables, you should always have one line space between them. Also, if I want to place the next variable into the next line, which is usually preferable, you always do it after the assignment statement. Okay, so if you have here and or if you have or, you should do that after the keyword. So I should do like this, and you'll see that especially in PyCharm automatically we're getting this backslash, and also the next condition is 2 indentation levels in. Okay, also normally no matter what statement you're creating, whether it's if statement or for statement, it is always good before every if statement to write a comment where you specify what the statement is doing. For example, if I write here a hashtag, this is what will define my comment, and here let's write the if statement checks if we can sell a house based on clean and available, and you can see that here we need to go to next line, so you can simply write another hashtag clean and available attributes. Okay, so this is the correct way to create an if statement that is readable and well understood from the users that are going to get back to it. The next thing I want to talk about regarding the indentation levels is when you're opening and closing brace, brackets, and parentheses. So as a general rule, they should always line up under the first non-white space character. And I will show you how this is done. For example, if I want to create a list called even numbers, and let's make this equal, and I want to open a parenthesis like this, and let's place the numbers here from, or all the even numbers from 2 to 20. So let's do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. Okay, so here in PyCharm you're going to get this exception because they need to have space after every comma. So if I click format, you see that here we need to have space after every comma. But let's say that you want to present this list in multiple lines, right? And not only this, but also sometimes you want to separate the list by every 5 numbers. Okay, so the proper way to do that is, first of all, you need to start from the parentheses. So you go right here, and then when you hit enter, the first character should start 1 indentation level in, and after that, if you want your next line of the list to be also with 5 characters, what you should do is you should break it after this comma here and place the other 5 characters on the next line. As you can see here, you also have 20, so we can place 20 on the next line too. Okay, and the final rule, when you want to present a list in this way, so you're stating just the number of characters on every line, you should also place the second bracket just under the last non-white space character as we discussed. So you will do something like this and then place it 1 indentation level in. So this is how your list, your proper list representation would look like. Now let's see also how with the same pattern you can add arguments to a function. So let's create a function here, so def, and I'll call it my_func, and here we'll pass multiple parameters. And let's pass a, b, c, d, e, f. Okay, we have 4 parameters here, and then I would like to print those. So let's print a, b, c, d, e, and f. Okay, so here again we can actually use the same rule in order to pass the parameters to this function. For example, if I want to run the function, and let's do my_func, and then I want to pass the characters, let's say a, b, c, d, e, and f. And as you can see here, the character a is assigned to the variable a, b to b, and so on and so on. Okay, so let's add some spaces here so we align with the guidelines. And after that, for example, if you want to place those characters on different lines, as there are too many, as I said, you can use the same rule. So here we're gonna break the line from A, okay, and now we're 1 indentation level in. Then the next one we're gonna break it from the comma here into D, and this bracket, as I said, you cannot leave it in the end. So what would you do instead? You would place on the next line and move it 1 indentation level here. Also, for consistency, many software developers would actually add another comma here, so both of those lines look equal in the same way you would do here after 20. Okay, so these commas, they would not interfere with the outcome of your function, but it is good and way more presentable comparing to the first way that the function was looking like. So as I said, this is one representation of either lists or function calls, but also you can choose to place the bracket right in the beginning of the line. Okay, the choice is yours. Both of those techniques are implemented, so you really can choose your style here. However, I like to always place this bracket in the same indentation level as the rest of my list, so I can identify that this bracket is part of this list. So this was everything I want to share, guys, with you about the indentation levels. I hope this video was useful, and for sure make sure that you watch the rest of the videos in that section. And of course, in the end, we're going to continue with a small project in which you will be able to implement all of those guidelines. That's it, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. I'm uploading completely free programming courses every week, so make sure you hit the subscribe button to get more coding skills. Tabs and line length. Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to talk about how you can space your code and what is the right way to do it, and also how you can keep up with the number of characters in your line. So as a general rule, you should always have one line between an if statement or for or while statement and the rest of the code, and also before and after every function you should always have two spaces. So in that way you can identify the function. And actually in PyCharm, as you can see, if you get closer than two spaces from another character and a function, you are getting this warning right here that you are not aligning with the PEP8 guidelines. And the same is the situation for after the function. You can see that here we're getting this warning, and you can reformat it like this. The next thing I want to talk about is the number of characters allowed per line. Normally in PEP8 the limit of characters is 79 characters per line. However, for text such as comments or a function description, those characters preferably should be about 72. And actually I will show you, if you're using PyCharm, how you can control that. For example, if you go to, so if I select here PyCharm and then I go to preferences, you can see that here if you go to code style Python, you can actually choose the number of characters, and as you can see I already have chosen this number to be 79, but of course you can increase it and decrease it, but 79 is the required number of characters for PyCharm. And if I select OK, you can see that we're getting this line here, which is exactly on the 79th character of the line, so you can keep up with the character count. And this is done because the long lines and the high amount of characters on the same line really disrupts your visual structure of the code that you are writing and make it more difficult to understand. So those limits are chosen to avoid wrapping very long lines of code, and it is usually not preferable to use tools that are allowing you to write Python code longer than 8 lines. In some teams, it's actually okay if you keep your code within 99 character line. However, this is only okay if the code is going to be read only by the team members, that they are aware of this. However, for general purpose, I advise 79 characters per line. But you would ask now how you can actually break a sentence. For example, if I want to place a description as a comment, let's write Worem in Google. So you can go and just copy and paste a paragraph that is long enough. And once you copy that, let's go back to your IDE and let's place it here. And as you can see, this is one very long line. So if you want to write this line as a comment, then in some IDEs like PyCharm, you can simply click return to go to the next line, and this next line will automatically be seen here as a comment. And you can do this with the rest of the lines too. And you can use this first line as a reference. Okay? And this is how you can fit the whole text in a readable manner. And this is the proper way for writing comments into multiple lines instead of one. On the other side, if you have, let's say, an if statement, let's say if, and let's create a variable that is very long. For example, let's create hello everyone, how are you? So let's say that this variable has a really long name, and let's make it equal to 1. And let's create another variable. Let's actually just copy that so we don't type too much. And let's call it good1, and then this will be equal to 2. So those are two very long variables. And for example, if I select if this variable is equal to 2, and, or let's do here or, the other variable that's also very long is equal to 2, actually this should be equal to 1, then we need to do something. Let's just write the keyword pass so this loop gets executed. Now, if you can see, here obviously we're having way more lines than we need. So what you can simply do is click return here, and immediately the other variable will go to the next line. And also you can space those with the backslash. Another time that you might exceed the number of lines, and this is probably the most widely seen use case, is if you do imports. So let's start importing here random variables. So let's import copy, code, and just wherever we can find with any type of letter. So let's do that. And this is actually something that could really happen because especially for big projects, you would have plenty of imports in your files. Okay. So as you can see, here we're having a bunch of imports, and when you import files, you can do actually exactly the same thing. You just hit enter in PyCharm, or you simply place a backslash here, and that will actually ensure that the imports on the next line are also accessible. For example, if I remove this backslash, you can see that here we're getting errors because Python cannot decide what these keywords are and doesn't attach them as part of the import statement. So if you want to transfer some line to the next row, you can definitely use the backslash in order to do that. So for example, now this statement is perfectly accessible for all the imports, and as I said, in many projects you will do multiple imports of either packages, classes, those things. So this is a really applicable use case to the everyday workflow of a programmer. Another example that you could have long lines of code is if you are opening files, because there you would need to refer a directory. So let's say if I do with open, and here if I want to specify a path to a file, so let's do path to some file you want to read as file1, and what this statement is basically doing, it is opening this physical file and assign its content to file1. Okay, actually let me place the bracket here in the open statement, and let's say that you also want to open another file, so you will do that by typing comma, and then let's do open, and here let's write another path, so path to some file being written. Okay, so here what we're basically doing is we're going to create a file or write into a file, and to do that you use this open method with the W option for write, and you can do as file to, okay, and then you can place the column here. Actually, let's do it as file 2. Yeah. So as you can see, this is another use case where we have a really long line, and the best way to cope with that situation is again to separate this statement from the comma here. Okay, so if I hit enter, you can see that even in PyCharm this is not auto-completed, but if I place a backslash here, you can see that this error is completely removed, and you can also place the open keyword one under the other. Okay, and let's say after that you can continue on this indentation level, right? So you can write file 2 dot write, and then you can do here file1 dot read. Okay, and in that way you're basically getting a file that's existing, and from this file you're copying all the information to another file. This is what we're doing here. So of course into day-to-day activities in a programmer, you might face this case as well, and this requires a single long line of code. So here using backslash to separate it into two lines is also quite appropriate. So this is how you are breaking lines and how you are achieving the maximum of 79 characters per line required by the PEP8 guidelines. Thanks for watching everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Object-oriented spacing and encoding. Hi guys, welcome back to the course. In this video we're going to talk about spacing and encoding when creating classes and methods in Python. So to do that, I'm going to create a new file. Let's select Python file, and I will name this file spacing underscore encoding. Okay, so let's create an example class here. So let's do class, and I will name it person. Okay, so usually in Python, when you want to create a constructor or a method that initializes the class with certain variables, you can simply do def init self, and you use the self keyword in order to define the current object of that class. And then let's select here height or height, and let's make it equal to 6 feet and weight equals to, let's say, 200 lbs. So you can do self dot, actually here's e, so self dot height would be equal to height, and self dot weight will be equal to weight. Okay, so here's how you initialize things in Python. The first thing to notice is that once you create your constructor, it should always be either with no separation from your class name, or it should have maximum one line of separation between the constructor and your class. And this is a general rule. Then you can create another method, def, let's name it get data, and here we'll pass self or the current object. So this one would simply print the height and the weight. So let's do, and here we will simply print the height and the weight. And actually I'm gonna remove those specifications here, we don't need them because we can specify them later on, and I will show you exactly how this is done. So here into get data, obviously we want to get the height and the weight, so let's do print and then height, and then let's do self dot height, and then let's write weight self dot weight. Okay, and as you can see here, since this is another method, you need to have at least one line separation with the previous one. And as you can see here, we're using only one line to separate functions, while as you can see in the previous file, we're using two of those. So what's the difference here? Well, you should know, and actually this is a question that they ask on many code interviews, that once a function is defined within a class, it is called method. And function within a class, according to the PEP8 guidelines, can be separated only with a single line, while function that is obviously outside the class, since it is expected to be among a larger amount of code that could be unrelated with the function, for that reason we expect to separate a function outside the class with two lines of code. But as you can see in a class, we're separating only with a single line. Also, within a function, you can separate the different lines of code with a single line difference. For example, if here you want to do completely different functionality from later on in this function, then you can leave one line and you don't need to write all the code without any separation. For example, here, since I have this print statement, let's say if later on I want to check, so let's do if self.height is higher than 6 feet, okay, you can return or you can print, let's do to tall. You can also create an if statement, so let's do else if self.height. So self.height, if it is smaller than 5 feet, print to short. And you can even do a else statement, so else self dot, actually for else you don't need to specify, so else you can simply print, let's print perfect. Okay, and actually let's make it here higher or equal to 6. Actually let's leave it like this, should be okay. So here it is really up to you, but I will advise you to never leave the if statement or the code with different functionality without any separation. And also, of course, I would advise you to write comments. For example, here you can simply write printing height and weight of a person, and here you can write checking height. Okay, so now as a user or as a person that is just coming to this code and see it, I even don't need to understand what's going on, but I can simply see what this line of code is doing here and what those lines of code below are doing as well. And actually let's try out this class if it works properly. So let's create a variable called Adam equals to a person with height would be equal to, let's say, 5.5 feet, while the weight would be 150 pounds. Okay, so another thing that you can see is that also here we're getting a warning, and this is because when you create a class, you should always have separation before and after the class, 2 lines, right? So this is the right way to write it, and you really should follow these guidelines for the spacing, because this makes your code professional and readable. Okay, so now we have here Adam, and let's run the get data method. So let's do Adam dot get data, and since here we're creating the object and we're executing methods for this particular object, it is preferable that you keep this without any separation. So let's run that, and you can see that first we return the height and the weight of the person, and then we return that the person is perfect since its height is between 5 and 6 feet. So this is the correct spacing, guys, for when you're creating class and methods. Of course, we're going to have plenty of more videos regarding how you can correctly write classes and methods, and also how you can follow the correct name conventions. But before ending this video, I want to just briefly speak about a topic that is quite important for the PEP8 guidelines and actually for your Python code. So there are some very important notes that you should take for encoding, okay? And encoding is basically the tools with which Python is translating the variables and basically everything that you are writing and perform operations. So as a general rule, the Python distribution should always use UTF-8 encoding, okay? And in Python 3 and in most of the IDEs, you're automatically getting UTF encoding, but sometimes if you're using packages or methods, you might face the chance to use different encoder. Better don't do it. According to PEP8, other encoders should be used only for test purposes, but never to a running code. And the main reason for that is because if you use other encoding, Python might get different amount of bytes from your commands. For example, if we do here, let's say print, and let's place some characters that are not in English. So let's search some Chinese characters. Let me copy some of those. So let's place this one, and let's place that one, and let's place them in brackets. So I want additional bracket here, dot encode. And here, in order to see the output of the UTF, you can say Unicode escape. Okay, so if I run that here, let me comment out the previous statement. If I run that command here, you will see that here we're getting basically the UTF-8 encoding, okay? And this is the one that Python is using by default. So where the problem comes if you use other encoding? Well, I can demonstrate this by printing the bytes. So if I do here length, and then let's actually place the same Chinese letters here, okay, dot encode, and here I can write UTF-8. So actually let me remove this parentheses from here and put one right here. So we're gonna get the length of this whole statement. Okay, so if I hit this, you can see that we're getting 6. We'll give you the number of bytes of this Unicode. So obviously the default encoder with Python is UTF-8. So for example, even if I remove this statement here, you still get 6 because this is the default. But in some cases, you might run into functions that will require you to specify your encoder, and I really advise you to specify always UTF-8 in order for your code to be consistent and professional. So these were the two things I wanted to discuss in this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. PEP8 imports and under names. Hi guys, in this video we're going to talk about the PEP8 imports, which is actually one of the most important topics when structuring your code in Python. So PEP8 defines an exact criteria on which imports come first and which imports come last. So according to PEP8, the standard library imports come first, then are the related third-party imports, and finally the local imports that are coming from your own libraries. But let's go now to PyCharm, and I will show you how you can deal and structure your imports in a professional way. So you already have this spacing encoding file, and actually keep it because we're going to use it to incorporate some of the local imports. But go now to your project and create a new Python file, and I will name the file imports. So one of the first things that PEP8 recommends is that when you import something, so let's do import, let's import OS and sys, and those are external packages. So I always advise you, instead of writing this like that or separating the packages with comma, it is more recommended to simply import each different package on a separate line. Or with simple words, we can say that this is the wrong way and this is the right way, okay? So always try to import as a first thing your packages on different rows. Now sometimes you want to import only certain attributes or certain modules from a package. In that way, in Python, you can write this by writing from, let's say, subprocess import, let's say subprocess error and pipe. Okay, so in that case you can use comma because you're basically taking all the different modules from the same package, and this is why I want you not to include the different modules with comma, so you avoid any confusion between modules and packages from those modules. I will actually always recommend you to upload or to import to your file only the packages or only the modules actually and the classes that you need from a package, so you don't overwhelm your Python file, and it's actually more readable. Because let's say, for instance, if you want to use subprocessor error and pipe and you use them later on in the code, instead of writing this statement, you can just write import subprocess. Okay, in that way you will still be able to access those attributes. However, if somebody else wants to access your code, he cannot see what are you going to use in your program if you just import the package. Instead, if you import all the attributes from that package, simply by this person seeing your imports, he can already assume what you're doing into the rest of your code. So let's remove the wrong example from here, and let's actually move the standard libraries. So far those imports here are coming from a standard libraries, and after that, once you are done from importing the standard libraries, which are those, also you can import math as well, which is a standard library, then you can import third-party libraries or libraries that are not created or not produced by the Python. So those are some external libraries. For example, if you want to install Django or Flask, you can simply do import Flask, okay, and this is a third-party software. Or also you can import Django, or also instead of importing Django directly, you can simply do the same thing from Django import get pass, for instance. So the distance between the standard libraries or the standard Python libraries and the third-party libraries should be a single line, and after you do those, then you can start importing local libraries or libraries from files that you created. You should know that all the packages and libraries are also within your file system. For example, right now, code layout can be interpreted as a package, while every file inside can be interpreted as a module. So for example, if I do from, and if I do from spacing encoding import, you can grab only this class person right here. So I can do person, okay? So this is how you're doing the local imports. Or also if I create a variable, for example, alpha equals to 1, you can also import alpha as well, okay? And you can see that if I remove alpha from here, so yes, if I remove the alpha and I enable all problem selecting, you see that alpha now gets an error because it simply doesn't exist in the other file. However, if I just go back and return alpha here, then this error will disappear, as you can see. Now also you can see that once I enabled the error checking, we were getting error with Flask and we're getting error with Django. However, you can remove those errors by simply installing these third-party packages, and I will install them right now so you can see that those errors should disappear. So here is Flask, and let me install Django as well. And actually, instead of get pass so we're consistent, let's do get version instead. So you can see that now you have the third-party imports and you have the local imports as well. So the reason why in PyCharm you're actually getting those imports in this gray color, it is simply because they are not used yet. For that reason, I was actually removing all the checks so you can see them in the correct colors. So let's do that. And this is how you can basically follow all the rules for importing Python packages, external packages, and local packages in your project. So once you're familiar with the imports, let's then talk about the module level dunder names. So those are things such as function definition, author, version, and so on. As a general rule, the imports should be always stated in the top of your file. So your file should start with the import. However, the dunder names, they always come before the imports. So things such as the description of the file. For example, this file is is a professional example to PEP8 imports. Okay, so this is basically a description of this file, and this comes before the imports. Then one line under it, then here you can import the future updates. For example, you can do from future import Unicode laterals, because the future import should always appear just under the description of the module. So the reason why future is included before any other imports is because in Python the future statements are special. They change the way the Python module is parsed, and for that reason they should always be on the top of the file. So when you add future, you could have different meaning of the words and the symbols that you wrote in the file, and this is why the future should always be on the top. Of course, if you need it. If you don't know and you don't have a particular reason how to use future, which I haven't had in my career, simply don't use it. But in this video, I want to let you know that if you need to use it, always place it on the top, just under the description of the Python module. So if you have future modules, you can add them here, and after that, just before the imports are coming the dunders. For example, you can choose the all statement to define a list with all the methods that you're using later on. Let's say A, B, and C. Okay, so let's say later on I can create a function called A, called B, and called C, and in fact, if I now remove or actually add the syntax check, you'll get errors here. But for example, if I do def A, or I create a function A and then I do the pass keyword, you'll see that this A is removed because the function is stated and also it is used. Let's actually create the other two functions, and then I will explain you why you need this all keyword in the beginning of every professional Python file. So let's do B and then let's do the C. Those are just functions and the pass keyword is used, so we don't face any errors. Now you can see that those are removed, and the O keyword is always used. So if you have multiple methods, the person that is reading the file can simply go to the beginning, check O, and see immediately the names of all the methods or functions that you're using within your file. Then comes the version of your file. So for example, let's call this version 0.1, okay, the first version of your file. And finally, you can place the name of the author, and here's my name. Okay, so here is how your imports and redundant names should look like. So let's recap. The name of the file always comes first, this description. Then if you need to add some future imports, they come next. After that, you're adding the dunder names, which could be definitions for the function, version of your file, and the name of the author. Then you're adding your imports in the following way. So first you start by adding the Python imports, then you add third-party imports, and finally local imports. And after that, you can then start writing your functions. So this is how it is basically structured, a fully functional Python file with all the imports. And this is done in every company that is following the PEP8 guidelines and the Agile Scrum working environment. So this is exactly how you should create your files if you work as a software developer and specifically using Python. So I hope that this lecture was really useful for you guys, and I gave you a lot of information that you can apply to your work. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next section.